huge thanks to our viewers here in Nigeria and around the world for joining us on the program today. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up. A once-in-300-year rainfall makes a comeback in Thailand as the rest of East Asia is inundated by floods. Massive fire leaves at least 13 people dead in Hong Kong, 15 more injured in Tai Po district. Plus, US President Donald Trump defends his special envoy Steve Witkoff in light of a leaked audio recording where he was advising a Russian official. Let's begin the world today. We begin right here in Africa. Guinea-Bissau's President Umaro Embalo has been arrested while he was inside the presidential palace. Happened this afternoon. A Guinea-Bissau army officer appeared on state TV declaring the president removed from office and all state institutions suspended until further notice. Also arrested are the Chief of Staff, General Biag Na Tan, Deputy Chief of Staff General Mamadou Traore, and Interior Minister Boche Kande. According to the president, no force was used against him during what he says was a coup d'etat, which he says was led by the Army Chief of Staff. Reporters on the ground say they heard gunfire at the National Electoral Commission headquarters and areas around. The country has been awaiting results from a presidential election that took place on Sunday. President Embalo has said he won 65% of the vote. Embalo's camp and that of the opposition candidate Fernando Diaz de Costa have claimed first-round victory in the November 23 presidential election. We'll be returning to Africa later, but now Thailand currently experiencing what is said to be historic floods, and the last of which was seen only just 300 years ago. 10 provinces across the country have been affected over the past week, with the city of Hat Yai, a business hub bordering Malaysia, recording a rainfall of 335 millimeters in a single day. Relentless rains have also ravaged neighboring countries.
Southeast Asia is grappling with one of its most destructive rainy seasons in recent memory, with record-breaking floods, consecutive typhoons and mass displacement stretching emergency response systems across the region. In Thailand, at least 33 people have been killed in severe flooding that has inundated 10 southern provinces. Relentless rains have also ravaged neighboring countries, like Vietnam, facing even greater devastation. The death toll has climbed to 98, with 11 others still missing after a week of torrential rain triggered landslides and widespread flooding. In Malaysia, more than 19,000 residents have been displaced across 7 states as monsoon rains continue to intensify. Indonesia has also been impacted. At least 19 people have been killed in North Sumatra, with 7 others believed to be buried under debris after heavy rains triggered landslides in 6 regencies. Search and rescue teams across the region say access has been difficult in remote areas. Although heavy rainfall is typical for this time of year, meteorologists say the scale and severity of flooding across Southeast Asia this season is exceptional, raising concerns about climate resilience in some of the region's most vulnerable communities.
The death toll right now from a building fire in Hong Kong has been put at 13, with 15 people injured in the incident. There have been more than 700 firefighters at the scene, tackling the blaze at Wang Fok Court, which houses about 4,600 residents. The government has paid tribute to a 37-year-old firefighter who died fighting the fire, describing him as dedicated and gallant. President Xi Jinping has expressed his condolences to the victims, according to state broadcaster CCTV. The blaze broke out at Wang Fok Court, a large housing complex consisting of 8 tower blocks, each of them 31 stories high. They provide 1,984 apartments for some 4,600 residents, according to the government census of 2021. The tower blocks were undergoing renovations, and the outside of the buildings were covered in bamboo scaffolding at the time of the fire. We're looking at Bangladesh, the aftermath of a terrible, massive fire that tore through one of the country's largest and most crowded slums, destroying 1,500 makeshift homes, leaving thousands of families homeless. This aerial footage was from earlier today, showing the extent of the fire across the low-income informal settlement of Korail. That's where at least 300,000 people live. Victims say they have lost everything in the blaze. They urge the government to help them get back on their feet. Local media reports the cause of the fire remains unclear. Victims spent the night in Kamabari Field, Ershad School Field, and Mokali TNT Field. We'll take a break from then and come back to the continent, as culture is one of the avenues countries and continents bridge the gap and tighten relations. Nigeria's relations with the European Union just got better through the Africa-Europe Partnerships for Culture, West Africa. It all begins here, the Madhouse, located on the grounds of the University of Lagos. Here, young creatives looking for a quiet place to harness their skills and expression can call home and create. The unusual structure, composed of shipping containers, overlooks a lagoon, but inside it is divided into an art gallery and other creative spaces. Guests are encouraged to take a peek before settling down for the launch of the Africa-Europe Partnerships for Culture, West Africa, which takes place here.
So, for this project, we have...
Director of Goethe Institute Nigeria, Dr. Nadine Siegat, explains that the project is for the festival sector, just in time for the many celebrations to take place in Nigeria, while connecting with the rest of Africa.
Through initiatives like the African-European Partnerships for Culture, we are not only showcasing Nigeria's talent internationally, but we are also creating pathways for collaboration, learning, and a sustainable development within the culture industry. We try to bring together artists, institutions, festival organizers, and international partners, and through that strengthening networks that amplifies Nigeria's creative voice and global presence.
The project, implemented by the Goethe Institute with funding from the EU, aims to consolidate regional and international cultural cooperation, particularly through the internationalization of the festival sector.
The objective of our project is to promote regional and intra-Africa cultural cooperation between the European Union and Africa, strengthen partnership between platforms, events, cultural organizations, equip, but most importantly, this is what we're working on, equip festival professionals and artists from West Africa with the skills to engage internationally.
Present for the launch is the European Union Ambassador to Nigeria, Mr. Gauthier Minon, who speaks on the €30 million project.
And culture has always played a great part to link our people. Africans and Europeans share the vision that culture is not peripheral. It is central to sustainable development, social cohesion, and inclusive growth. We see culture as a driver of mutual understanding, creative innovation, and economic opportunity. And the EU remains committed to deepening partnerships that amplify African voices and foster cultural diversity.
Channeling the good wishes of the Nigerian federal government in support for the project, Special Assistant to the President on Art, Culture and Creative Economy, Mr. Ayomide Adiagbo, says the project corresponds with the renewed hope agenda.
His Excellency is a leader whose agenda champions creativity, innovation and youth empowerment, and the acceptance of AEPC work signals the President's commitment to creativity as a cornerstone of national transformation.
Even though Lagos is the starting point, the project will eventually extend to major cities in the country and later connect to other parts of Africa.
European and African leaders agreed to strengthen trade ties and better tackle irregular migration at the African Union-European Union Summit, which wrapped up on Tuesday. The EU wants to strengthen its influence and secure access to natural resources in Africa, where it is competing with the US, China, and Russia. The DW's Chiponda Chimbelo joins us now from Berlin with some answers to some questions we have. Chiponda, great to see you. Was the summit a success, do you think?
Well, some agreements on increasing trade and reducing irregular migration to Europe were, of course, reached. But the verdict on the success of the summit will really depend on whether both the European Union and the African Union deliver on those pledges. Now, the European Union is promising to invest up to 150 billion euros on infrastructure projects in African countries by 2027 through the Global Gateway. Now, the Global Gateway was actually set up to compete with China's Belt and Road Initiative to help countries in the Global South improve their infrastructure. Now, for the EU, this is also a lot about getting access to critical raw materials. That would, of course, include rare earths, copper, cobalt, and lithium.
And that is a tongue twister. How crucial is the EU-Africa partnership then?
The EU is Africa's top trade partner. A third of the continent's exports come to Europe. In 2023, trade in goods and services reached 467 billion euros, and that is according to data from the EU. And of course, the EU is the leading source of foreign direct investment to Africa. Now, Europe has an interest in Africa's economic and political stability because the impact of many crises there can also be felt here in Europe, especially through irregular migration, which is a polarizing topic. And that is why we heard European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen say that Europe's and Africa's prosperity are connected. That's also because economic progress and political stability in Africa would help reduce the number of irregular migrants to Europe.
And now that the summit is over, Chiponda, what can we expect going forward?
A lot will be riding on whether the EU does deliver on its promises and, of course, what other countries like the United States, China, Turkey, or even the Gulf states are doing on the African continent. Now, the EU is trying to emphasize that its projects are greener and protect human rights. And while that may be true, the fact is that we have seen a lack of a very clear strategy for investing in Africa over the last 2 decades. And that is something that has helped China in particular make inroads on the continent. And in recent years, Brussels has, of course, been more focused on the war in Ukraine, which is right at its doorstep. And while that does, of course, directly impact security here in Europe, it's important for the European Union not to lose sight of what is happening on the African continent. And that is, of course, because political and economic stability there do affect the European continent as well.
Chiponda, thanks again for the updates. South Africa's state-owned Transnet Engineering has unveiled its new 23E tracks locomotive fleet. The entity views this as a significant milestone after prolonged delays caused by global supply chain disruptions. COVID-19 shutdowns and shipping backlogs slowed the delivery of critical components, stalling assembly lines and delaying production targets. Our South Africa correspondent Innocent Samosa has more.
Group Chief Executive of Transnet, SOC, Advocate Michelle Phillips, says the unveiling of Transnet Engineering's new 23E trucks locomotive fleet marks a critical turning point for the state-owned rail infrastructure.
The country looks to Transnet to support broad industrial development in key commodity segments. The strategy repositions us to better serve our customers and key supply chains such as mining and manufacturing. Increasing locomotive availability unlocks capacity, enabling transit freight rail to sustainably handle increased volumes.
Phillips also underscored the importance of private-public partnerships.
Transnet says the introduction of the 23E fleet is being positioned as a step towards restoring industrial capacity and boosting economic performance, but the questions remain about how much recovery those locomotives can realistically bring.
Yeah, so if you look at it, if we deliver about just 47 of these units in a year, they can actually earn us about 2 billion rand, which means that they're actually moving quite a lot of tonnages in a year. So 240 by the time in 2024 we started with ramping up, we were over 100. And now we're obviously sitting at locomotive 200 with having achieved the 43 in the last year.
But what economic returns does Transnet Engineering anticipate from completing the 23E fleet, and how will this influence future investments, regional trade efficiencies?
I hope that question will be different. What tonnages are we looking forward to enhance or to get? We are currently sitting at 160 million tons. We are looking into going into 180 tons with the TFR. We also want to see ourselves in the next few years doing the 250 million tons. So this is the objective. The main objective is to make sure that we move tons.
We're now at a beat rate of 6 locos per month, sometimes more, and that's up from 2 previously. So the partnership has been great. We've been very honest between Alstom and Transnet on where we needed to improve.
The rollout of the 23E trucks fleet is being closely watched as a potential boost for South Africa's rail sector and industrial recovery. From Durban, South Africa, Innocent Samosa, Channels Television News.
Spokesperson for the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called on the US and Venezuela to engage in peace efforts amid heightened tensions between Washington and Caracas. On Monday, the US State Department officially designated the so-called Cartel of the Suns a foreign terrorist organization, alleging that the group is headed by President Nicolas Maduro and senior officials of his government. Since September, the U.S. has carried out over 20 attacks on alleged Venezuelan narco boats, killing many of those on board. Caracas hit back claims about drug trafficking, saying the U.S. is carrying out strikes without evidence or any authority to do so. Mr. Maduro has hit out at the U.S. imperialism and said the Trump administration is attempting to instigate regime change.
We don't have a particular position on...
Does that even exist, that group?
Let me just... Okay. We don't have a particular position on that labeling and that decision, which was made a unilateral decision by the United States. I can tell you, though, that we've been following the general situation with grave concern, especially between the U.S. and Venezuela and the Southern Caribbean, and the increasingly confrontational rhetoric which risks heightening regional unease. It's imperative that all member states and all actions by member states fully comply in their obligations under international law, including the Charter. And the Secretary General calls on member states to create opportunities for dialogue and to continue to engage in efforts to find a peaceful way.
U.S. President Donald Trump has defended Special Envoy Steve Witkoff as doing the standard thing after a leaked recording appears to show him advising a Russian official on how to appeal to the president. Trump told reporters on Wednesday he had not heard the audio, but that Witkoff was doing what a dealmaker does, to sell the peace plan to both Russia and Ukraine. The leaked call from last month emerged days after a 28-point draft peace plan presented by the U.S. largely reflected Russian positions on its full-scale war in Ukraine. Witkoff has visited Moscow several times this year and will meet Russian President Vladimir Putin again next week. He has never gone to Kyiv in his role as special envoy, although other U.S. officials have visited, and U.S. Army Secretary Dan Driscoll went to Kyiv this week, and Trump says he will hold further talks with the Ukrainians. Getting to the fun part of the news now, automakers from China and around the world have showcased their latest cutting-edge vehicles at the 2025 Guangzhou Auto Show, drawing thousands of visitors to experience the newest automotive technologies. And this all happened on Monday. A lineup of vehicles from global brands, including Mercedes-Benz, BMW and Audi, stood alongside Chinese manufacturers such as BYD, Xiaomi and Huawei. Visitors explored cutting-edge innovations in vehicle systems, engines and AI-driven features. The most notable trend this year focuses on new energy vehicles, which are supported by pioneering technologies and caught the attention of many attendees. Hosted by Guangzhou Zilian Exhibition Service Company Limited, the 23rd edition of the Guangzhou Auto Show remains one of Asia's most influential automotive events.
左下角充电功率的提升速度。好了，已经来到。
Simply amazing. And as we end the program, Virgin Group founder and billionaire entrepreneur Richard Branson has announced the demise of his wife, Joan Templeman. She was aged 80 years. On his Instagram handle earlier today, Branson said his wife was his best friend and guiding light, the most wonderful mum and grandmum our kids and grandkids could have ever wished for, he said. The couple married on Necker Island, owned by Sir Richard in the Caribbean in 1989. They have 3 children, Holly, Sam and Claire Sarah, who died after 4 days. Paying tribute to his mother, Sam Branson described her as the kindest, most loving, warm and abundantly generous woman to walk this earth. That's the world today. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.